Hello. Thanks for coming, everybody. I'm going to talk to you about Bastion today. Me, this guy, who am I and why am I up here talking to you all? Why on earth am I here? I'm responsible for the music, the sound effects, and all the recording and directing of the narration for Bastion. I did all of that. Bastion is my first game. I've never worked on a game before, and this is also my first talk of any kind like this. So bear with me, my voice is a little hoarse from cheering for Johann Sebastian Joust last night at the at the awards. I love that game, man. It's so good. So my main background is not as a game composer. This is my first game, as I said. I'm actually a musician, primarily songwriter and composer for other mediums. I did a little bit of TV and film stuff, but mostly I worked as a producer before this as well, just kind of producing some local New York bands and as an audio engineer. That is my main background. So this was a new thing for me. The way I got involved was not the way I think most people get involved, with a lot of perseverance and rejection. I got involved because I have super talented friends, pretty much. Amir Rao, sitting right here, that's us when we were 12 or something at Great America. We've been friends since we were 8 years old. And he basically is one of the co-founders of Supergiant Games. So when he asked me to participate in Bastion and do all the audio for him for this company, I was flattered, of course, and I said yes. Big ol' yes. I consider myself extremely lucky because I love the hell out of games. That is me, in case you're wondering, that is me at the 2010 National Rock Band Championships. We won, just in case you want to know, we won. But in order to do this, you have to love games a lot. It takes a lot of commitment, hard work to get to the nationals. So that's something. So I grew up on games. I loved games my whole life. Playing everything from Nintendo to Super Nintendo and PC, Sega, all that stuff. Some of my influences in terms of music that I love in games, stuff like Marble Madness, the original one for Nintendo, not the arcade one, specifically Dungeon Keeper, Bionic Commando, Diablo 2, all that stuff was some stuff that really made me stop and think about how much I was enjoying the music. And the Dungeon Keeper CD, the actual CD-ROM, I took, and you could actually play that in your car. You could put it in your CD player and play the music from it. So I would do that all the time, drive around just listening to creepy, atmospheric Dungeon Keeper music. Explains a lot of my high school experience, I think, probably. So I got a wide range of musical influences outside of games. Everything from the Beatles to Jeff Buckley and show tunes, Led Zeppelin, all that stuff, and some weirder Bjork and the Pixies and Radiohead and DJ Shadow, all that good stuff. So I have a wide array of things that influence my musical taste. So how did I do it on this project? How did I do everything? Well, I did it alone in a closet. That's pretty much how I did it. I'm talking about the work I did for the game. I am 100%... I am 100% of the audio team for Bastion. I recorded everything in my New York apartment while the rest of the team was working out of a house in San Jose. I felt like a castaway. I don't know. Let's put that there. The one benefit of actually working kind of isolated from everybody else, so it was a little lonely, but one good thing about it was that it was acceptable for me to look like this. Unshaven and shirtless, which was much of my time working on the project. So the way that we stayed synced up on everything was we used Skype, Dropbox, and Subversion to communicate and share files. And another thing that was really important to the project generally, and specifically to the way I approached the audio, was that we configured the game around the talent that we had on team. So, we scoped for what we knew we would be able to do and do well. I had no money, that is to say, no budget for the audio for this game. I had some amount of money, obviously. I ate food and had an apartment and stuff, but no budget. And one of my goals was to try to make it sound like I had a budget, and to not make it sound cheap was one of my goals. And I found that with a lot of time and effort, you can kind of replace the need for a big budget by having like expensive sounding results, by putting a lot of love into it. So I'm going to talk about 3 different sections really for the rest of the talk. I'm going to talk about the music specifically and how I made over an hour of hi-fi sounding original music with a lo-fi setup. I'm going to talk about the narration, how we recorded over 3,000 lines of professional sounding narration in my closet, even though it was definitely not professionally, the techniques I used were not necessarily professional techniques. And the sound effects, how I made hundreds of sound effects with only a small sample library and a bunch of mouth noises, which I will get into in greater detail later. Don't you worry. I'm saving the mouth noises for the end. So I joined the project really early on. I had an opportunity to have a real influence on the project. The tone was kind of still being established when I was joining up, and we were kind of going for a gritty frontier fantasy, a la somebody like Cormac McCarthy, The Road or something like that. What if Cormac McCarthy did like a fantasy video game was a question we had, and we tried to answer a little bit with Bastion. So I was basically the first person on the team to actually execute on this tonal idea that we had. The game was being prototyped and the game mechanics were being worked out, and meanwhile I was kind of prototyping the audio as well and trying to figure out what the game was going to sound like. And so I actually took those ideas about gritty frontier fantasy and made some music and some sound effects to try and express that tone. So I'm going to show you a little video here to illustrate exactly how early I was involved. This is... You know what? Let me give you a tour of my studio. I think I missed that. So let me do that, and then I'll give you this. So this is a little tour of my studio here. This is my setup. So this is where all the audio magic happens. This is my workstation. This is the wall of guitars. Some of them are not real. Some of them are. Long cable. Kitchen. Dog food. Bedroom, Logan, puppy. Say hello, Higgins. Say hello to the people. Say hello. And this is where all of the actual recording goes down. As you can see, there are headphones, sheets strewn about, a copy of Dune on the bed, and then the microphone where when my girlfriend goes to work, a man comes over and hangs out in my closet all day. So I'd like to give you a little bit of context for this next video real quick. Basically, this is a really, really early prototype from Bastion. This is what you're going to see is actually in the Bastion, whatever we had for the Bastion at the time. And if you listen closely, you will recognize some of the stuff you hear. So just to give you an idea of exactly how early I was involved and how that piece of music that I made is still, it's shipped with the game. that exact file, so it's actually called, it was actually called Town Music Rough. that thing that I gave them, and it shipped with the game. So before there was any art in the game, there was music. We are actually using monsters scanned out of D&D books for a while to. So I definitely I got in real early in that sense. Music led for most of the early part of the process. Music led the design, the art, and the writing in terms of tone, and that was really cool to be able to have such an influence on the project as a whole. And also, it gave me time. Being involved early gave me time to figure out what the heck I was doing, because this is my first project. So there was definitely a learning curve involved. So this is it. This is what I used. Logic Pro, a Shure KSM32 wide diaphragm condenser mic, which we saw in that video, and a Digi, pardon me, and a Digi 002 rack unit. You see right there in that picture, and that's about it. I used that SM57 you see there. I used a little bit for talkback and some mouth noises, but that's pretty much it. I had a very limited set of tools actually on this project, and I tried to do a lot with a little, which brings me to plugins are my friend. They are fantastic. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do the work I did on this game 10 years ago. A wall of outboard gear that you find in a fancy recording studio is really expensive and takes up a lot of space, and I had neither money nor space. So plugins were basically my only option, and I used the hell out of them. Logic Pro is great. Right out of the box, this is not like I'm not sponsored by Logic Pro, I just love it. Logic Pro is great. Right out of the box, it comes with a ton of wonderful plugins and a lot of amazing presets that other software like Pro Tools, which is perfectly great, but in order to get it up to the level of functionality for what I was doing, I'd have to spend a ton of money on plugins. So Logic is a really good option, and it has a lot of amazing presets, actually. I was able to get from my idea that I had to something that actually sounded really good very quickly, because I could just dial up a preset and then tweak from there. So, I wasn't afraid to just start from a preset and then tweak it to make it my own. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the music more specifically here. So for this project, I really tried to just do the thing that I knew how to do the best, which was write songs, because that's my background as a songwriter. Even the instrumental pieces on the soundtrack all are kind of structured like songs. They have an A section, a B section, sometimes they have a bridge. And that was how I approached pretty much all the pieces, including the actual songs. I set out to do something I'd never really heard before in games. I've grown up playing games, so I'm pretty familiar with a lot of different game music, and I felt like I'd heard a lot of electronic stuff and a lot of orchestral stuff and maybe some straight-ahead rock stuff or some combination of all three. But I wanted to do something that wasn't any of those things, because I wanted to place the player somewhere they hadn't been before, was part of the idea. And I wound up at this thing I call acoustic frontier trip-hop. The idea of this was that if I invented a genre for all the music to fit in, I could make it all connected to each other without repeating themes or making it repetitive. Also because my main background isn't really as a traditional composer, so I wasn't as comfortable with developing the repeating themes and doing a lot of the traditional composing techniques that do that thing, that tie all the music together. So I tried to do it, I tried to get around that by creating a genre and hoping that all the music would kind of fit there. And acoustic frontier trip hop, it has that kind of gritty Western vibe, the acoustic guitars and like kind of bluesy undertones. It has exotic sounds, which represent kind of the frontier element. It has all sorts of Asian instruments and a whole bunch of different world instruments. And I tried to use a lot of sampled beats to kind of blend it all together and give it a modern kind of urban flair, so that it would be kind of otherworldly and transportive in something that you hadn't really heard before, and something that you couldn't place specifically. I wanted it to be familiar in that you could relate to it, but exotic at the same time. And that was kind of the goal. Specifically, I'm going to talk a little bit about Zia's song in particular. I wanted to, the whole team actually, we really wanted to create a moment in the game based around a song performed by a character. And we thought that we'd seen a lot of songs in games done, used to great effect, something like Portal, and we really admired the way that game used music, but we wanted to do it in a way that we hadn't really seen it done before. We wanted to make it enhance the emotion of an important story moment. Was really kind of our goal with this. It's kind of a somber moment when you come upon Zia. For those of you who haven't played or have, I'll remind you. It's kind of a somber moment when you come upon Zia. It's intended to be haunting, and she's just finding one of the few survivors that you find in this kind of post-apocalyptic world. So we wanted to add a lot of emotional weight to that moment in the story. I wrote the lyrics for the song based on game world fiction. Greg Kasavin, this gentleman in the front row, he actually wrote a massive game world doc with tons and tons of background on the culture and the religion and all sorts of amazing stuff for me to pull from for the lyrics. So that was really helpful in writing. And I tried to write it from the character's perspective, not specifically from Zia's perspective, but from the point of view of the Ura. I wrote it as like a wartime folk song was kind of my idea for how I'd approach it. So the way a lot of this stuff would work, all the pieces I'd do is I would make it and then submit it to the team to see what they thought, and then I would complete it if it needed completing. So in this case, it was a song intended for another singer, so I demoed it myself, and so here's a little taste of what that sounded like.
Dig my hole, you build a wall. I dig my hole, you build a wall. One day that wall is gonna fall.
I'll spare you the chorus. That's a little too high for me. Thank you. So once the team liked what they heard, and I had the go-ahead to go and record with a vocalist, I called up my friend Ashley Barrett, who I actually knew from San Jose as well. Amir and I grew up together in San Jose, and I did some theater with Ashley growing up. We were both based in New York, so I called her up. I'd worked with her before on another project, and knew her voice would be just really nice for this. So I called her up, and she agreed, and it was delightful. She did a great job. So the level that you find Zia was actually designed kind of around this song, and there was actually narration written to reference the lyrics of the song. We wanted to do a lot of things to kind of root the song deeply in the actual world of the game that you were experiencing. So we did things like applied some programmatic reverb and panning and attenuation to it. So when you start out on the level, it's kind of built in like a spiral sort of. So Z is in the center, you start here and you kind of work your way around, and as you move around her, the song moves around in the stereo image. Also, we have a thing set up where the further you are away from the source of the song, the more reverb there is, and the quieter it is. And then the closer you get, the less and less reverb, and the louder and louder the piece gets. Which is, you can see right there. So let me show you how it all came together. This is the actual level from the game.
Well, no point explaining what happens next, right? Suffice it to say, kid ain't coming home empty-handed. And besides, it's like the song goes.
I dig my hole, you build a wall.
They'll be here before too long.
So you'll notice that when you get right up to Zia, all the reverb disappears and it's just the naked track. So I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the techniques I used here. So I had to be pretty creative to try and give the illusion that I had a budget on this, or that budget wasn't a factor in the decisions I made, even though it definitely was. You can't exactly get a huge live drum sound in your apartment, so or in my apartment anyway. It's a little New York one, so I had to tailor my approach to suit the means available to me. So I decided it was both a creative choice and a technical limitation for me to use sampled drums, for example, and MIDI drums throughout the soundtrack, because I just didn't really have access to the means to record good sounding live drums. So in this case, I used my limitations to guide kind of where I was going creatively. So the soundtrack overall is just about equal parts MIDI samples and live instruments that I perform myself. And I'm going to show you an actual session, Logic session, with one of the tunes from the game here. So I'll just show you like 4 measures of the song, and then I'm going to break it down for you into the segments. So that's, this is a song that occurs kind of later in the game. Let me show you just the live instruments part of that, which is the bass, in this case, the bass and the ukuleles. As you'll notice, there's a lot of little edits in the ukulele because my playing was not amazing that day. Just wanted to lock it in, so. So that's all the live stuff that's happening right there. I was really pleased that I was able to find a use for distorted ukulele somewhere in the. So this is all the MIDI stuff that I'm going to show you, which is just a synth and a couple pieces of the rhythm section here. So that's the MIDI portion, and then the remainder are the samples I used, and here are all the samples, which is just multiple pieces of the rhythm section. And one more time, here's what the whole thing sounds like together. Now I'd like to show you a little something from the B section here. This is a section that has actually no live instruments in it in this particular part. I rely a lot more on samples here to deliver the melody. So let me just play this section for you in its entirety here real quick. So it's pretty much the same rhythm section here, but I'd like to actually call attention to this particular sample that I used. Let me just isolate this for you here. Now, when I'm using samples, a lot of times they've been pretty mangled by the time they get to the piece I'm putting them in. Like from the original tempo and key, when I put them in to fit with the piece that I'm working on, sometimes they end up, the audio quality is pretty compromised. So what I try to do is, a lot of times I would try and mask that by putting effects on it and making it sound crappy intentionally instead of crappy by accident. So on this, for example, I have this pretty extreme EQ on that one. Let me show you what it sounds like without the EQ. you can hear a lot more of the crap in there. A different amount. This one, I could sell it as, oh, it's just coming from an old record player, but the other one is like, oh, this is a mangled sample, you know. So whenever I use samples, I tried to dress them up at least to give them more character, if not to hide the fact that they sound bad. So there you go. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So when I was writing each piece, I would kind of start with a tonal goal, something that I wanted to achieve in terms of an emotion. We had a few different areas in the game that were each going to have kind of a distinct feel. We had the Byzantine first section of the game, and then the more frontiersy middle section, and then the kind of spacey last section of the game. So for each of those areas, we wanted to have a few different pieces to express different moods. We had like a somber piece for each area. We had one that was just kind of a middle of the road, establishing the tone of that area, and then we had an intense one that would probably be used for combat or something like that. So what I would do is I'd start with a tempo and a tonal goal, and then that would usually lead me to like some sort of guitar riff, or for the piece I just showed you, it was the ukulele part was like the first thing I came up with for that. I had the tempo and the ukulele, and then I would go from there. So like I was talking about, I always try to dress up my samples. I think that's really important to give them character. And if you're going to use samples, which I did pretty liberally on this, I found it, I didn't want to be lazy and just pull them out of the library, which probably would have sounded fine, but I wasn't happy with just doing that. So I always tried to give them a little bit more character. And I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the narration now. Logan Cunningham. I think he's hiding. I don't know where he is. He was here, and he was here. He's a good fellow. This is him, as you can see. He is the narrator for Bastion. He is a friend of mine that we went to high school together. Also, there he is, from San Jose, California. He also grew up with Amir and myself. Amir met him. They actually played soccer together when they were kids, and we met in high school and did a bunch of improv comedy together and all that stuff, and did theater together. And we were roommates in New York at the time that I started working on this project. So we were kind of experimenting with different narrative techniques to try and convey story. How do we give the player context for what's going on and give the player a story without making them stop, and doing the wall of text thing. Diablo 2 is a game that I love dearly, but we wanted to not do the thing where you talk to Deckard Cain and there's like this giant wall of text for 5 minutes. There's story and then there's game. We wanted to try and incorporate both. So the fact that Logan is a talented actor and was my roommate, we thought, well, hey, let's just try some narration. You want to come to my room tomorrow and record some narration? And he did, thankfully. And we liked it so much that we just kind of went whole hog with it. And that's why we ended up with 3,000 lines of narration. And we recorded all those lines over the course of about a year with tons of sessions. It was definitely a lot of time spent to get all those lines in. We were willing to spend a ton of time, and I think that's part of why we were able to overcome our lo-fi setup, basically. We did a lot of specific techniques to help with that. We close mic Logan really close. To minimize room noise being picked up. And also the character of Rux, the voice Logan does, is actually really quiet, so it was another reason for that as well. So we minimize hiss. We do a ton of takes to get the performance just right. So let me show you this, which is a video. The context for this is you're going to be hearing me on my talkback mic from the other room. You're going to be hearing the audio from Logan's mic. I apologize for the dimness. My closet, it's a closet, so.
Great. So let's make it happen. Yeah, we're rolling.
Well, he somehow makes it back in one piece.
Give peace a little bit more importance.
Well, he somehow makes it back in one piece.
Watch the plosive on the P.
Well, he somehow makes it back in one piece.
Great. Now, a a little bit more like pleasantly surprised.
Mm-hmm. Well, he somehow makes it back in one piece.
Try to imply a little comma after well.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, he somehow makes it back in one piece.
Give it the well a sort of like, well, what do you know? Kind of, well, what do you know?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of vibe.
Well, he somehow makes it back in one piece.
Great. Again, just watch the plosive.
Well, he somehow makes it back in one piece.
One more time.
Well, he somehow makes it back in one piece.
Flatten it out.
Well, he somehow makes it back in one piece.
Flatten it out even more.
Well, he somehow makes it back in one piece.
I like that. One more time.
Well, what was it?
Ready?
Well, he somehow makes it back in one piece.
Cool.
And that last one is the one that's in the game. So we did that that was our normal thing. I mean, that took about 2 minutes right there. That was maybe average, somewhere less, somewhere longer. I mean, the first one was good. Like, that's the thing. But we'd do it until it was just exactly what we were looking for. So you multiply whatever 2+ minutes by 3,000 lines. That's a lot of time. So Logan and I would actually pick takes together, usually after we recorded a line, which is not normal, as I understand it, for the way a lot of VO is done. But Logan and I would listen back to the takes together and see which one we thought was the best. And it was actually really nice to have another set of ears on it, because doing it all at once later by myself, it's like it can go a little insane when you're doing hundreds and hundreds of lines, like trying to figure out which take is the best, especially when you have so many takes. So that was really helpful for me. And sometimes even we'd actually comp 2 takes together if we needed to, if we liked the beginning of one and the end of another. So we'd do that sometimes. As far as processing goes, I would try to treat each line like the vocal in a song. Since my background is as a producer, I was familiar with that. So I would automate levels if there were plosives or harsh sibilants that I couldn't get out with the de-esser. I added a lot of compression and EQ as well. I compressed the hell out of it because I wanted it to really pop in the mix. And since it was narration, it didn't have to sound like he was in a room somewhere speaking. It could sound, like it's right in your head. So that was part of the approach to that. Now, consistency was really important to us, since having recorded over such a long period, the character can change in that amount of time if you don't have some rituals that you do. We actually had to re-record some of the earliest lines that we recorded in the game, the very beginning of the game, where the kid gets up and all that stuff. We actually had to redo that, since the character had changed towards the end, just enough towards the end of the project to make those not super consistent anymore. We ended up re-recording those about 5 times, I think, throughout the project. We developed a warm-up to help find the character or Rux quickly. So what we discovered was that Bill the Butcher from Gangs of New York, plus the narrator from The Big Lebowski, plus Al Swearingen from Deadwood, in that order, somehow kind of made Rux. When Logan would imitate each of those people and then put them all together, it became Rux. So I'm going to show you a video of part of that. This one's a little quieter than the ones. I apologize for the audio on this one, but the context for this is he's just done those other three characters, and this is the result. I would give him random stuff to read, not part of the script, just anything that I had laying around, a copy of Dune or whatever, whatever.
Okay, now do as the narrator.
The warm spring spicy scent of organic cinnamon will flood your senses when you open the box. Woven into the center of our organic wheat biscuits is a fusion of cinnamon and organic evaporated cane juice crystals. The true taste experience you'll enjoy, balanced with the goodness of over 20% of your daily value for fiber.
So I'd like to talk. My favorite one is we have him reading from the Monstrous Manual, a Dungeons and Dragons 2nd edition Monstrous Manual. That's the best one I think we did, was that one. Although the fiber was pretty good. Rux is like a big fan of getting enough fiber. One of the keys in implementing the narration that we tried to achieve was not to break the immersion with the way it was implemented, and this was tricky. It meant that we needed to have no line stomping. We never wanted to have any line cut off prematurely before he finished saying what he had to say. Rux never interrupts himself, and he never repeats himself unless you replay a piece of content. That's part of why there were so many lines in total in the game, is that nothing is repeated. So all that is scripted by hand. Pretty much, I think you two guys did all of the scripting yourselves, right? Just the two. Yeah, so Greg and Amir here scripted all of those 3,000 plus lines by hand. We had a couple different ways that the lines would be set up. One of those ways was this thing, Q equals never Q, which means that the line wouldn't play if another line was playing at the same time that it was queued. So this was for lines that weren't necessarily crucial to the story or to your understanding of what was happening, but were there to add some context and flavor, which was, a lot of the material was like that. So if a player was playing quickly and triggering lines before he was finished speaking the previous line, that was our way of trying to account for that. Q equals always is what we use for essential lines that you had to hear no matter what. So if a line was playing and a necessary Q equals always Q line was triggered, then it would just wait till that line was done and then play the next line. Now I'm going to show you a bunch of horrifying code, and I apologize. This is luckily I didn't really have to look at this too much. This is mostly those guys. But for example, it's a little cut off, but someone who ain't like Mr. Beckley is that thing that top line says there. That line is set up as Q equals never Q. If you look down a few lines, you'll see there, when the family is destroyed, then it's supposed to play Q equals never Q. When the family is destroyed, that sounds horrible. And then if you look down the page a little further, it was someone like him. That line is set up as Q equals always. That's because that's a crucial line for when you see Zulf and discover Zulf. So that's just an example of a couple of different ways it was set up. Another thing that was essential to this was neutral line delivery, because that allowed us to have lines appear in any order and not seem like they were out of order, out of context. And that also made Greg's job writing them super tricky, because the lines did need to follow other lines to some degree, but they didn't need to depend on them. So they all had to kind of stand alone, which was a super tough challenge in the writing. And narration was reactive, so we were trying to let the player know that we were paying attention to them and have Rux kind of comment on things that they would do. We were inspired by moments like the Psychomantis fight from Metal Gear Solid. I don't know if you guys remember that, but where he like read you your memory card, and it was like, that blew my mind. I got so horrified when it's like, how does he know I like that game? And that freaked me out. But we wanted to have some moments like that kind of throughout the game. Let me show you a video of some gameplay here to illustrate that bit from the very beginning of the game.
Proper story is supposed to start at the beginning. Ain't so simple with this one. Now here's a kid whose whole world got all twisted, leaving him stranded on a rock in the sky. He gets up, sets off for the Bastion, where everyone agreed to go in case of trouble. Ground forms up under his feet as if pointing the way. He don't stop to wonder why. Finds his lifelong friend just lying in the road. Well, it's a touching reunion. He sees what's left of the rippling waters, years of work undone in an instant, in the calamity. That a survivor? No, ma'am. It's a gas fella, forced out from underground. Kid pops it good. Fella got a piece of him, though. Kid just rages for a while. Now...
So as you noticed, I believe that, when you break enough crap, the narrator says kid just rages for a while. We put that in actually after we showed the game at PAX and noticed that everybody wanted to just break everything. So so we put that in to let the player know we were paying attention. And another example is even when right at the beginning when the kid actually gets up, the narrator's, that's the first taste of the narrator is not going to say anything until I do something, and he's going to say something based on what I do. So we're trying to establish that. And we tried to have as many of those kinds of moments as we could throughout the game. So we have at least a few on each level. At least that was the idea. So I'm going to switch gears now again to sound effects, which is another big part of the project. For me, this is probably the most daunting part since this is my first time ever doing sound effects or any kind of sound design. So there was a lot of experimentation involved for me early on, trying to figure out, what does it sound like when a genie gets hit with a hammer? Like, I don't know that. So I have to figure that out. And which is a question I actually asked myself at one point. Cause the gas fellas were like kind of, what are they? They're like kind of look like a genie. I don't know. So I was trying to figure that out. And apparently it just sounds like, when you hit something else with a hammer, it's like it's not a special, unique properties of a genie that make it sound different. So the sound effects were comprised of mostly samples and then a little bit of Foley that I did myself and some mouth noises. Here we go. Mouth noises, everybody. You ready for this? So this is the rattletail that you see in the corner. It's an enemy from later on in the game. And pretty much all the rattletail sounds are just me making crazy sounds with my mouth. And recording them into a microphone. And the reason I had the confidence to do that later on in the project actually is because I saw John Ottman speak at Comic-Con I think 2 years ago. And like when I was kind of in the middle of the project. And he, in case you're not familiar, John Ottman is the editor and composer for a lot of the Bryan Singer movies like X-Men. And so he was saying that the sound of the X-Men jet landing was him just going like I was like, what? I can do that. So I went home and made a bunch of mouth noises. So having good sound libraries makes your life a lot easier. It's not absolutely necessary because I didn't have great libraries for a while. I got another one eventually, but it makes life better just because you don't have to look. When you don't have a good sound right away, you got to like Frankenstein stuff together by combining things that kind of sound like it. And eventually you can get there, but it just takes a lot of time and a lot of experimentation. So, my apartment was not an ideal Foley studio, so that's part of the reason I didn't do very much Foley. I did a little bit at the end, hacking up some pineapples and whatever, but and that was fun. I ate pineapple afterwards. It was really good. But let me show you an actual sound effects session here that I have. This is one I was talking about. The mole was our dev name for the rattletail, but this is the sound the mole makes when he enters the battlefield, when he phases in. All right, let me play that for you one more time. That's just me like making crazy sounds into a mic. It's a little processed, as you can see. I got a chain of effects here, but it is just me making some mouth noises. Here's another one. This is when the mole dies. I actually have 3 different mouth noises I've made all combined. Here we go. Ready for this? One more time. There you go. So, it took a while for me to figure out exactly what I wanted it to sound like. So here's actually me just kind of sitting there in my underwear, like in the middle of the night at my desk, trying to like figure out what the mole sounds like. I even tried to get my dog involved. This is him. Nothing. It's no good. Closer, and then here's some sounds. Me trying to figure out what it sounds like when it dies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that's what that guy sounds like. So yeah, I mean, I'm ultimately happy with the way the dude turned out, even though I felt silly doing the effects for him. So the way I would approach sounds usually is I would look for stuff that sounded kind of like what I had in my head, and I'd look for similar sounds to use as ingredients. And oftentimes, those ingredients happen to be catapults. I discovered that catapults, pretty much when you mix them with any sound, just like make the other sound more awesome for some reason. And I use those for most of the weapon sounds, actually, in the game. Let me show you here. This is a mole sound that is not mouth noises, actually. It is a combination of a whoosh and a catapult. So let me show you that. All right, here we go. One more time. Okay, here's the whoosh by itself. You know, it's a whoosh. But here's the whoosh and the catapult. Oh, yeah. This is a catapult by itself, just for your reference. It's pretty rad by itself, I mean. So anyway, I used a ton of catapults, basically. My main goals for the sound effects was to give good player feedback. That was really like what I wanted to try and achieve with all the sound effects, mostly. My secondary goal, which was almost as important as the first one, was to not be annoying. These are sounds that players are going to hear thousands of times throughout the course of the game, and I wanted to make sure that you could hear them over and over and over again without wanting to kill yourself. So what I would do when I'd make a sound effect is I would sit there and listen to it on a loop like 100 times and just make sure that I didn't want to die. And if I didn't, then I was like, oh, it's good to go. That was my test. And then the other goal was for me to seem like I knew what I was doing, because I totally didn't. So that was it, to give the illusion of confidence. So for mixing, I tried to highlight my strengths in the mix, meaning, and also I wanted to highlight what was most important to the player and the game. So obviously, but the narration was kind of the most important feature because it conveys story and context and all that stuff, and it was really important for you to hear the narrator front and center. So he was like up in the middle, very loud. And then the music was kind of next to that, in my opinion, just because it did a lot to convey tone and the emotion of the moment. And we had a lot of important moments in the game involving music. And then sound effects were kind of like there for information, player feedback and stuff, but weren't as important to me as the other ones. And also, I was just the least confident about them. So I didn't try to bury them, but I just didn't want them too loud for people to be like, that's just him making mouth noises. You know, I didn't want that. So automation really helped the narration pop out. We do ducking for, whenever a line of narration was played, everything kind of just ducked a whole bunch to help the narration pop out. And just the thing that I tried to achieve with all this stuff was just immersion. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of this whole thing, is to enhance player immersion in the project. The tool I used for integration was Exact, which is the free Microsoft tool, and that's pretty much the best thing that I can say about it. It was just super counterintuitive for me, coming from using like Logic and stuff with faders and things you can see. I didn't really, trying to mix in that was just crazy, but there was a big learning curve. And also the thing that was really not good was the horrible build times. We had a ton of audio in this game. We had over 3,000 lines, over an hour of music, plus a whole bunch of ambience, and then a bunch of other, sound effects. And towards the end of the project, build times were like half an hour or more. So if I made any little change to the mix and I wanted to check it in game, I'd have to wait a half hour. And also, that made the team hate me a whole bunch during crunch, because I would submit a change and then everybody's working till 4 in the morning, and they would have to sit for a half an hour and wait while the audio build finished. So I was a real popular guy towards the end of the project. Basically, to sum it all up, I got in early and I drove the tone of the game, and I think that's part of why the audio ended up feeling kind of organic and integral to the game experience. I played to my strengths, meaning that I basically tried to do the things that I knew I'd be able to execute. Especially musically, I just did the stuff that I knew how to do, and I scoped for what I knew I'd be able to get done. And I used the limitations of the project as guidelines for me, creatively and otherwise. So, like I was talking about with the music, I couldn't record live drums, so I intentionally didn't want to have live drums, if that makes sense. And I worked super hard alone in my apartment. That was that was a big part of why I think it turned out is because I put in a lot of time and a lot of love, and I loved the work that I was doing. I had a wonderful, wonderful time working on this project. So I think my hope is that people can feel that when they play the game. And it seems like all that stuff worked. Some awards, and not bad for recording in my closet. Thanks, guys. Before I take questions, I'm supposed to remind you guys to fill out the things that are being emailed to you, your evaluations. So do that later. If you have a phone, you can do it right now if you want. But also ask questions into, I guess you don't have to ask into a mic. I'll repeat your question if you want. Just be loud enough so that I can hear you. And I think that's all the business I have to take care of, right? There's nothing else? Okay, sweet. I'll take some questions. Anybody? Yes?
Hi, one thing. You said that you had basically no budget.
Mm-hmm.
If you had, would you have treated the production any differently in the process?
Got it. So the question is, if I had a budget, would I have treated the production differently? Maybe. Especially for the vocal recording, I think it would have been nice for Logan to have like a room, not a closet, like an actual, it would have been nice to have a vocal booth. Maybe, and actually that was the one part that was made the hardest by the lack of budget, I think, because it's really important. That's kind of the most important part, to be kind of silent and have really good isolation. So, it would have made me have to do a lot less editing and a lot less stuff to kind of edit out all the room tone and all that stuff. So probably for that, I would have maybe done it a little differently. For the music, I'm not sure. I'm kind of glad that I had that limitation, because it drove me creatively to the place that I got to, which I thought ended up being cool. So I don't know that I would have done it differently musically, but I might have if I didn't. But I don't know. Yeah.
Hi. In terms of the instrumentation and the percussion for your soundtrack, it's sort of unusual. So I was wondering how you sort of decided both to go together to make sure it sounds good. Maybe it's just a matter of experience, but if I tie it up, it sound like crap. Okay.
So the question is, for the instrumentation and what was it?
Percussion.
And the percussion, how did I decide to put together the things that I did? At first I set up that genre for myself, the acoustic frontier trip hop genre. So I decided, okay, it's going to have this kind of element and that kind of element, and there were some ingredients. I wanted to have some sort of acoustic elements, some sort of elements that were exotic, and some sorts of elements that were kind of hip hop or sampled beats. So basically, if it fit into one of those three categories, I was pretty confident that it was gonna work with the other stuff. If I already had the trip hop stuff, then maybe I'd look for the exotic sounds, and if I already had that, I'd look for the frontier stuff. So it kind of it kept my creativity in check. It gave me the guidelines to be able to make all the pieces be coherent and not just jumbled nonsense. was the idea. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Where do you want to go from here now that you've become internationally known as a video game composer?
Okay.
A rock and superstar. And you are in New York based, and there are a lot of students in New York. Have you ever taken intern or students?
So the question is, now that I am an international superstar, would I? Where do I want to go from here? And would I take an intern? Is that? Yeah, I mean, I want to keep making game music with Supergiant. That's my plan, and it's awesome. I mean, I'm doing some side projects and stuff for fun, but this is my the thing that I've had the most fun doing in my life ever. So I just want to keep doing it. Would I have an intern? I don't know. If I had enough work that I could delegate somehow to somebody that I need an intern for, then maybe. But I don't know. It's just like me hanging out in my underwear in my apartment. It's not like I don't know what you're gonna learn from that, you know. Like, you know, my dog sits on my lap at my desk like this. I don't know. That's it. Yeah.
First of all, thanks for the great talk, and I think Zia's song is probably the best use of music in a game ever, so thank you for that. It made me cry. It was awesome.
Awesome.
I was curious if you've ever considered releasing the stems to Setting Sail so that your fans could remix it? Or anything similar?
So the question was, have I considered releasing stems to Setting Sail? Not really. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it.
If I beg, will you?
I don't know. I'd have to. I guess I'd have to start thinking about it and see. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely had people interested in that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's something I'll think about.
So I know you got in on the project really early, and I think that's really awesome for all of the audio guys here. We all dream of that, and it ends up giving, a great product, and it sets the tone. It's awesome. So when precisely did you get in? Was it on the ground floor when the idea was still forming, or?
So the question was, when did I get involved with the project exactly? Basically right at the beginning. Amir and Yavin moved into his mom's house with some computers for a bit, and they were prototyping. And while that was happening, pretty much right away, I was given the task to make some experimental music for it and do some basic sound effects. Pretty much right at the beginning.
Cool. Thanks.
With the dialogue in the game, were the lines of dialogue something that were written by you and the actor through improvisation or otherwise? Were they written by the lead designer, some type of creative writing specialist? How did you go about creating that?
Sure. So who wrote the narration is what you said. Yeah. So Greg Kasavin wrote all the narration in the game. This gentleman right here, and Amir Rao, served as his editor, basically. And then by the time the lines got to us, they'd been combed through and iterated on. So they were all good, really good when they showed up. And in Rux's voice, if there was a word or something that we didn't feel like Rux would say or something, we'd tweak it and we'd talk to Greg about it. But that was it. How did I keep all the lines organized? So I have 1 minute left. This is the last question, I guess. I'm sorry. How did I keep all the lines organized? Not well. That's how. One thing I didn't talk about here, which I did not do well on this, was naming conventions of assets. I totally sucked at that. Just because there's stuff that was kind of experimental stuff that ended up making it into the game, and I didn't know that was going to happen. So there was all sorts of mismatched names. But eventually, we had a system where each level was basically in a spreadsheet, the narration, and the spreadsheet had a name and of the level of the map that it was going to be used for, and what would happen is, just based on the line number in the spreadsheet, it was that map _ line, and that's how we kept all the narration organized. Yeah. So thanks everybody. I think that's all we have time for. Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone coming.